the easy part in Afghanistan is that there are so many problems that you can actually pick your successes quite easily. Because the key now is to assure the population that there's light at the end of the tunnel, there's a pathway for moving forward, that uncertainty can be managed. So under a national government option, this can be done, and it would save a lot of American lives and a lot of troops. Because the troop numbers, for instance, the troop numbers are arrived now because there is an assumption that the Afghan police is criminal, to put it bluntly, and the Afghan army is weak. But we have 135,000 demobilized officers who know every inch of the ground. Politically, nobody made the decision to bring them in. You could actually create a security force that is trained in counterinsurgency, only it was trained by the Soviets in counterinsurgency. It's quite nationalist in composition. So the minute one shifts to the how part, one can get a lot of things right, and it produces stakeholders. So a transitional government would be an equally feasible proposition because it would have two tasks. Hold the election, hold a clear, an election that meets the criteria of free and fair, or at least credible, secure, and inclusive. That would require something like 2 years. The second would be to reach out to the Taliban for a political agreement so that they would participate in the election. A lot of insurgencies finally have to end up in the political domain.
But what you clearly are saying, when you say corrupt political brokers cannot be actors, you're clearly saying then Karzai cannot be an actor.
Karzai can or cannot be, depends on how you construct the system. The problem is that in the last 5 years, Karzai was treated by the Bush administration as the sole government of Afghanistan. He told me a story. He was coming, I think, to Camp David. And the U.S. ambassador prepped him 6 hours on the way on the plane for a series of very hard messages saying, you really need to reform, Mr. President. President Bush is going to tell you. And when he met with President Bush tapped him on the shoulder and said, I understand your difficulties. Don't worry. When he came back, there was zero commitment to change. So messages matter. And the issue is not the person. We focus too much on a person. I worked with Karzai from 2002 to 2004. And the way to manage him is to give him options and timelines. But the bond process, the way we had constructed, had very tight timelines. So you could not postpone a decision. No decision got postponed by a week. But the minute he became an elected president, he would sit on a decision for 2 years. Realism is not to say that you ignore every reality. Karzai is now a force, and a force that can further violence. So how to bind and bring them together is important.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question, then turn to your questions, and please identify as you ask them. This question will have 2 parts, and I suppose it has to do with how we handle things in the U.S. Domestically. You did write a 10-year framework for Afghanistan for us at the Atlantic Council before the election, which I think it's still on our website. I think we have some copies outside that's really worth reading because it steals the thunder of those who say Afghanistan just can't be fixed. Why are we even there? It lays out how it can be, and it lays out why it can be and what resources and economic factors it has. So let's lay that aside. Here's the question. You said politics is the art of the possible. The framework the Obama administration has to deal with, for better or worse, is shorter because he'll be reelected and he has to show some progress in Afghanistan soon. Is it possible to achieve anything you're talking about, or is the American political system sort of gravitate against that? The second part of that is you were talking about McChrystal's report not being accompanied by a report on governance and politics. Who should be doing that report? Is anyone doing it? Is it Holbrooke? Is it the UN? Where should that report be done, and is anyone working on it?
On the first one, a lot can be done within a year. A year is both a very short time and a very long time. The critical part is the following. Decide on a set of achievable goals, not on a set of unachievable goals. The United States has a habit of setting itself for failure because it sets such ambitious goals that then it criticizes itself for not achieving them. The goals have to become feasible. Tell the public, both American and Afghan, that these are the goals and you're going to achieve them. Then as you achieve them, tell them again that you've achieved them and repeat the cycle. That's how we managed Afghanistan between 2002 and 2004. And everybody was giving us credit. A set of constructs can still be made. For instance, a third of the population lives in cities. Transforming 6 municipalities is not rocket science. I can do it in my sleep. But if you got 6 municipalities to say things are really going right, and it's as simple as at times paving 400 kilometers of roads in Kabul, because then they'll say something visibly is happening to change my life. Or providing X number of trained people to be hired on $2 a day. You know, when cost of 1,000 U.S. soldiers for a year is $1 billion, $400 million in public works is a very small price if one can avoid those numbers. So these trade-offs can and must take place. This is why the how part really matters. I think precisely because now Afghanistan is a domestic issue in the United States, it is likely that critical decisions will be made soon. So that's my reading. Because if it were not a domestic issue, the way it was not under President Bush, the decisions would have not been made. Mm-hmm. Precisely the decision-making moves to high gear when something moves to the domestic agenda. So getting this war right, it's, for better or worse, President Obama's war. Mm-hmm. And his credentials in the security field depend now on getting it right. Your second...
the McChrystal report in a governance and political sense.
The governance and political sense, I think it will have to be Ambassador Holbrooke's office. I think they're working on it. But we hope that it will come soon and it would have the matching clarity and then the synthesis that needs to take place. That synthesis can only take place at the National Security Council. Peter Rodman's book on presidential decision-making is enormously interesting because he reviewed it from President Nixon all the way to President George W. Bush. And he makes one point. The bureaucracy here is too complicated and risk of stalemate is too high unless the National Security Council intervenes and manages an issue that matters to the president. So I think our friend General Jones is going to be in the critical position of making those strategic choices. And once they are made, then the rest of the bureaucracy can be aligned with it. But Congress also has a very significant role. For instance, reform of U.S. foreign aid is a very long-drawn process. We cannot hope that it will be achieved within 2 years. But treating Afghanistan as a pilot for reform of foreign aid is a very practical idea.